20 years after the silence settled, the truth still lingers like an unresolved echo. At the height of Hollywood fascination, Billy Bob Thornton and Angelina Jolie were not just a couple. They were a spectacle of intensity, obsession, and raw vulnerability. Vials of blood worn as jewelry, confessions whispered on red carpets, love that burned too brightly to last. And then, just as suddenly, it was over. Papers filed, doors closed, public smiles masking private fractures. For 2 decades, the world speculated, constructed myths, and filled the quiet with rumors louder than reality. But behind the headlines was a man unraveling in slow motion, and a woman evolving faster than the marriage could survive. What truly broke them apart? Was it fame, fear, incompatibility, or something far more intimate and unspoken? As time passed, wounds hardened into scars, and memories gained clarity. Now, years later, Billy Bob Thornton finally confirms the reason he walked away. A reason rooted not in scandal, but in psychology, identity, and the unbearable weight of loving someone you cannot keep. The question remains: when love collapses under its own intensity, is anyone ever truly at fault? The late-night Los Angeles streets glowed with paparazzi flashes, as if the city itself sensed something volatile had been born. In 1999, Billy Bob Thornton and Angelina Jolie did not drift into love. They collided. Their first connection carried the force of recognition, 2 wounded interiors locking onto one another with instinctive urgency. Billy Bob, seasoned by heartbreak and haunted by a lifelong fear of being disposable, saw in Angelina a rare intensity that did not flinch from darkness. Angelina, restless and emotionally ferocious, recognized in him a permission to feel everything without apology. Their love unfolded publicly, almost recklessly. Red carpets became confessionals. Interviews blurred into emotional exhibitions. Vials of blood hung at their throats like talismans, symbols of devotion that thrilled the public and unsettled those closest to them. But beneath the spectacle was something far quieter and far more fragile. In private rooms, away from cameras, their connection was heavy, intimate, and consuming. Silence lingered long after conversations ended. Touch carried desperation rather than ease. Billy Bob clung to the relationship as if love were oxygen. Each moment of closeness soothed his deepest terror, the belief that he would eventually be abandoned. Angelina, meanwhile, burned with a need for total authenticity, even if it meant self-destruction. Love was not meant to comfort her. It was meant to transform her. These differences were invisible at first, masked by passion and intensity, but they were already shaping the future. Their wedding came quickly, almost defiantly. It felt less like a milestone and more like an attempt to freeze a moment before it slipped away. The vows were real, spoken with trembling sincerity, but they were also fragile, built on emotion rather than alignment. In the glow of early devotion, neither acknowledged the unspoken truth. They needed different things from love. As the world watched, enchanted and bewildered, the marriage seemed untouchable. But in the quiet after the applause faded, unease crept in. Billy Bob began sensing that the intensity he depended on was also the very thing exhausting her. Angelina felt the walls of commitment pressing inward, even as she loved him deeply. Their love was not fading. It was overheating. Late nights grew quieter. Laughter softened into contemplation. The fire that once united them began demanding a price neither had prepared to pay. And somewhere between devotion and fear, the question emerged, unspoken but unavoidable. Could something this powerful survive without destroying the people inside it? Long before they found each other, both had learned that love was unpredictable and safety was temporary. Billy Bob's childhood was shaped by instability, financial uncertainty, emotional absence, and the slow formation of a belief that he was always one mistake away from being left behind. He learned early to anticipate loss, to feel it approaching even during moments of happiness. Love, to him, was something fragile, something that required constant vigilance. Angelina's upbringing carried a different weight. Raised around fame and beauty, she experienced closeness without consistency, attention without grounding. Emotional needs were acknowledged but rarely stabilized. She grew into someone who felt deeply and quickly, someone who chased intensity because calm felt unfamiliar. Pain, at least, was honest. When they came together, these unresolved wounds did not cancel each other out. They amplified one another. Billy Bob's fear of abandonment translated into emotional dependence. He listened for changes in her voice, noticed pauses in her affection, felt threatened by her independence. Angelina, sensing that weight, struggled against the feeling of being needed more than she could give. Love began to feel like responsibility rather than refuge. Their arguments were rarely loud. Instead, they were quiet, internal, filled with what went unsaid. Billy Bob feared expressing his insecurity, worried it would push her away. Angelina feared expressing her restlessness, afraid it would wound him beyond repair. So they smiled publicly while privately retreating into themselves. Psychologically, the marriage became a reenactment of their earliest fears. Billy Bob loved with urgency, as if every moment might be the last. Angelina loved with intensity, but not with permanence. She needed room to evolve, to redefine herself. He needed reassurance that evolution would not leave him behind. In moments of closeness, the wounds softened. In moments of distance, they reopened violently. The love was real, but it was not healing. Instead, it was exposing everything neither had resolved alone. The more they tried to hold each other steady, the more they destabilized one another. Love, which had once felt like salvation, slowly began to feel like pressure. And beneath every tender exchange lived an unspoken realization. They were not escaping their pasts together. They were reliving them. The marriage survived on hope and avoidance, but the cracks were deepening. What neither could admit yet was that love cannot repair wounds when both people are still bleeding. And the cost of ignoring that truth was about to surface. As Angelina's career surged forward, the world expanded around her. Film roles grew bolder. Public perception shifted. She was no longer simply an actress. She was becoming a force, a figure of meaning and influence. With each transformation, Billy Bob felt the ground beneath him subtly change. He watched from the edges, supportive yet unsettled, proud yet increasingly invisible. Publicly, they remained united. Appearances were polished. Smiles were practiced. But behind closed doors, something essential was slipping away. Conversations shortened. Shared silences lengthened. Billy Bob felt the familiar ache of being left behind. Not physically, but emotionally. Angelina was moving toward a larger purpose, one that stretched beyond the intimacy of their marriage. The imbalance was not malicious, it was inevitable. Fame did not pull them apart directly. It simply revealed what was already misaligned. Billy Bob longed for stability, routine, and emotional safety. Angelina was being pulled toward the unknown, toward experiences that demanded change and expansion. Their love existed, but their trajectories no longer matched. At night, hotel rooms felt colder. The noise of crowds faded into isolation. Billy Bob's fear deepened, though he rarely voiced it. He had learned long ago that expressing need could invite rejection. Angelina sensed his withdrawal, mistaking it for resistance, unaware it was rooted in fear. Neither wanted to be the one to say it aloud. Acknowledging the distance would make it real. So they lingered in denial, hoping closeness would return on its own. But love does not survive on hope alone. The quiet between them grew louder, filled with questions neither dared ask. How do you hold on to someone who is becoming someone else? And how long can love endure when it asks both people to become smaller? The marriage was no longer collapsing. It was quietly drifting apart, and neither knew how to stop it. The end did not arrive with an argument. It arrived with understanding. Billy Bob began to see what he had been avoiding. Angelina was not pulling away out of cruelty or indifference. She was evolving, and that evolution required freedom he could not emotionally survive. In quiet moments, he observed her with painful clarity. Her curiosity, her growing sense of purpose, the way her identity expanded beyond the boundaries of their life together. Loving her meant letting her grow. But letting her grow meant confronting his deepest wound, the belief that growth always leads to abandonment. Angelina felt the shift as well. She loved him deeply, but love no longer felt like enough. She sensed herself shrinking inside the marriage, accommodating fears she did not create. Guilt weighed heavily on her, but so did the knowledge that staying would cost her authenticity. There were no villains here, only two people reaching the limits of what they could give without losing themselves. The decision to separate formed slowly, painfully, in silence. By the time divorce papers were discussed, the marriage had already ended emotionally. Billy Bob did not experience it as rejection. He experienced it as surrender. Letting go felt like failure, but holding on felt worse. Signing the papers was not dramatic. It was quiet, heavy, and final. As the marriage officially dissolved, Billy Bob was left alone with questions that echoed louder than the headlines. Could love exist without permanence? Had he been loved fully, or only temporarily? The public searched for scandal. None came. The real ending had happened far from cameras. In moments of self-recognition, neither could escape. And though the marriage was over, its emotional consequences were only beginning. Time has a way of softening sharp memories without erasing their meaning. 2 decades later, Billy Bob Thornton speaks not from pain, but from clarity. The anger faded long ago. What remains is understanding, not just of what happened, but of why it had to. He confirms what was once only speculation. He did not divorce Angelina Jolie because love disappeared. He divorced her because love alone could not bridge who they were becoming. He recognized, slowly and painfully, that staying would require him to abandon himself. And loving someone should never demand self-erasure. Looking back, he sees the marriage with compassion rather than regret. It was real. It was intense. It mattered. But it was not sustainable. He understands now that Angelina was not leaving him. She was answering a call within herself, and he was not being left behind. He was being forced to confront wounds he had long avoided. Angelina went on to become something larger than either of them could have predicted. Billy Bob found peace in quieter spaces, learning to exist without measuring his worth by permanence. The marriage became a chapter, not a failure. Legacy, he realizes, is not defined by duration. It is defined by honesty. Their story remains not as a cautionary tale, but as a reflection of how love can be both transformative and temporary. In acknowledging the truth, Billy Bob releases the final weight of silence. The divorce was not a tragedy born of betrayal. It was the inevitable result of two people loving deeply while needing different futures. And in that truth, there is no bitterness, only acceptance, and the quiet understanding that sometimes letting go is the most honest act of love.